Welcome to Lesson 6 on thermal energy. This is Activity 6.4, what determines how much thermal energy an object has. So we will look at a few scenarios and determine which object has more thermal energy. So the expectation for you is by the end of this activity to be able to determine which object would have more thermal energy when comparing objects. So here we go. So use your knowledge of mass and temperature. What I want you to do is decide which object will have the most thermal energy, and place a check mark in the box to the right of the item that will have the most thermal energy. So go ahead, let's do A. There's a large amount of water temperature at 30 degrees Celsius, small amount of water at 30 degrees temperature. Go ahead, put a check box in the box next to the one that you think has the most thermal energy. So let's do C. And we'll do B after these two because they're side by side. So C, a small mosquito at temperature of 35 degrees Celsius, or a large mosquito, same mosquito, mosquito 8, except it's larger at a temperature of 40 degrees Celsius. So go ahead, which one do you think has the most thermal energy? Now, let's look at B. An ice cube, it says cube, but you can see it's ice. It's an ice cube at 30 degrees Celsius, or the same cube, only now it's at 60 degrees Celsius. So which one has more thermal energy? How about D, a cup of hot tea or a tub of cool water? So which one do you think has more thermal energy? And again, we're going to discuss these. So just whatever you think. Again, I would do it in pencil, so if you're wrong, we can always switch it. And then E, you have steam, you have water or ice. Now let's assume they all have the same mass. Which one's going to have the most thermal energy? So once you've done this, you're going to move on. And you're going to be answering some questions. But first, let's think about it. Now here are some key points. The more molecules an object has, the more mass it has, correct? The more molecules it has, the more TE it has, or thermal energy it has. So the more TE it will have compared to an object with a smaller mass. Assuming, this is important, assuming the two objects have the same temperature and the same type of molecules. So again, when we're comparing a smaller object and a larger object, we have to assume that they have the same temperature if we're going to be able to pick out which one has more thermal energy. And they have to have the same type of molecules. So they have to be the same object. Now, thermal energy is determined by the total KE of an object's molecules. So, go ahead. Now that we've discussed that, choose any one of the scenarios. So look at A, B, C, D, and E. Choose any one of the scenarios and describe why you chose the object you did in that scenario. Which of the following has more thermal energy? A cup of boiling water or a bathtub full of warm water? Explain. So again, choose any of the scenarios and describe why you chose the object you did in that scenario. Again, I'm not sure why the book has this one. I would just go with this one, otherwise it really doesn't make sense. So which of the following has more thermal energy? A cup of boiling water or a bathtub full of warm water? Explain. And then finally, conclusion. What determines how much thermal energy an object has? So go ahead, complete these, and we're going to go over these in class. However, let's review a little bit before we end the video. So use the terms thermal energy, kinetic energy, molecules, mass, and temperature in your responses to these. So can you explain how much thermal energy an object has? Are you able to do that? I would expect you to be able to do that, and we're going to review with that shortly when we go over this. When you change the thermal energy of an object, what are you changing? And what are the factors that affect thermal energy? If matter is made up of molecules and thermal energy is the energy resulting from the movement of molecules, does everything have thermal energy? So go ahead, answer those questions. What do you think? And be prepared to respond to those when we have our group discussion. And then finally, we're going to add a scientific principle, so you can go ahead and add that right now so we don't have to worry about it later. Every object has thermal energy. So this actually answers some of the questions that we just went over. And number 11, an object's thermal energy increases as its temperature and or its mass increases. So again, this answers another question. What are the factors? Well, its temperature is a factor and its mass is a factor. So an object's thermal energy increases as its temperature and or its mass increases. And we have a third one here, number 12. Thermal energy is the total KE, or kinetic energy, of molecules or atoms that results from their motion. The hotter an object is, the faster the particles move. The cooler the object is, the slower the particles move. So go ahead, add these to the front of your book, to the scientific principles, and we're going to go over these again when we go over the lab in class. Now, if you're absent and you're doing this to get caught up, make sure you ask questions in class. If you have them, make sure you show your teacher that you're done, so that way your teacher can mark off that you completed this activity. And again, ask questions if you have them. Thank you.